This episode may contain adult themes and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Sorry.
What's the trick in making my love stick? What's the trick?
Hello, and welcome to the Film Critic and the Common Man podcast. While other film podcasts might witness an atomic bomb explosion, we just assume it's a lady going to heaven. Every episode, we discuss a film from the perspective of a film critic and from the perspective of a common man. We may not agree, but it certainly won't be boring. I'm your co-host, Ben Miller. I write about films for my own site, Ice Cream for Freaks, and I'm a member of the North Texas Film Critics Association, as well as the International Film Society Critics. You can hear me guest on other pods of the David Thewlis of podcasting. I'm joined by my brother and common man co-host, a man who loves nothing more than flying model planes around. Jake Miller, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, buddy. How are you?
Not too bad. How much nostalgia did this film bring you as far as just your obsession with World War II and fighter aircraft in general?
A lot. Yeah, as you know, I'm a history buff.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, especially I'm a World War II history buff.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, I'm an aviation weirdo, even though our younger brother is an actual
pilot, but I mean we're yeah.
Yeah,
I get it.
But I'm historic aircraft are fascinating, and basically all of World War II I'm pretty into. So
it's one of the most filmed wars as far as narrative films are concerned. There's probably more World War II films than anything else. Vietnam's probably a close second, but World War II films is almost its own genre. All right, this week we're talking about the film Empire of the Sun, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Tom Stoppard, based on the book by J.G. Ballard, starring a very young Christian Bale, John Malkovich, Miranda Richardson, and Nigel Havers, co-starring Joe Pantoliano, Leslie Phillips, Masato Ibu, and a weirdly looking Ben Stiller. Opened on December 11th, 1987. It considered a box office dud, 22.24 million domestic, but it made up its money internationally, 44.46 million. So $66.7 million. Jake, what do you guess is the budget of this film based off of what you saw, historical aircraft, all the explosions? What do you guess how much this movie cost?
I would guess 25 million.
You nailed it exactly, and I think you looked it up. But it is 25.
I have a Wikipedia open right now. Yeah,
well, it's a solid guess, buddy. Yeah, $25 million budget, which every time at every frame I was watching, I was like, man, he stretched it to the max. The amazing things he does in this movie. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards: Best Cinematography, Best Art and Set Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, and Best Original Score. It lost all 6 to the same movie, The Last Emperor. It's an interesting film to kind of have side by side, because it's about the last emperor of China right before World War II started. So kind of an interesting companion piece between the two. Rotten Tomatoes, 76% on critics, 90% through audiences, though, much higher. Unsurprising that a Spielberg movie has a higher audience percentage than critics. Critics in general were very kind to it regardless. So Jake, this was your pick. Why? What about this movie stands out to you? Why did you want to talk about it?
Well, like I said, I'm a big fan of history, specifically World War II history, specifically aviation. And this is all heavy on that. And I felt like historically it's fairly accurate. I mean, there's obviously always something you could pick apart,
of course,
or something like that. And but I really like I like the setting. Um, this state of tumultuousness that I don't think most of us really understand how, messed up the entire world was during World War II. Um, so I like that setting. I think it tells a cool story of, a lot of innocence,
Hmm.
a reclamation of innocence, or a reflection on what are we doing and why are these wars, why is this going on and everything.
Yeah,
But just the historicity, I think
sure.
that aspect is uh, what I like the most.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to get into with this film, in how it's kind of, it depicts a part of history, and especially a part of World War II that's not exactly it's not exactly the first thing you think of. I mean, just the idea of China in general
Right,
during World War II is not necessarily something that is well known. Like, a
right.
lot of the World War II stuff is essentially the European theater, maybe
Holocaust,
the
D-Day,
Holocaust, D-Day, the
Eastern Front,
Eastern
Russia,
Front, Eurasia,
Soviet Union.
Russia, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then you have the whole Pacific side of things. But there's a
Hmm.
lot of there's so much of the war, specifically, like, there was so much of the war going on, like specifically between like Northern Africa and in
Hmm.
Eurasia, where, or
Hmm.
not even Eurasia, like actual Far East Asia, that it was all
Hmm.
these interesting stories and all this really in-depth stuff that really never gets delved into, mostly just because it's not really
Yep.
it's just not popularized. It was never popularized. I mean, so,
Right.
and yeah, so
Yeah, and I don't know why that is, to be honest, because there are fascinating stories and stories of incredible heroism and sacrifice, and
yeah,
you know all across the Pacific theater, but uh, yeah, the European theater seems to get more of the limelight.
yeah.
So
I think it probably just has a lot to do with, it's like, well, they speak, a lot of them speak English or close enough to English, and it's like, well, they kind of look, they're the waspy natures. I guess, American sensibilities. Oh, those are allies, as opposed to, like, China seems like a foreign world, much less a different country. So, all right, Jake, can you give us a quick plot summary of Empire of the Sun?
yeah, so basically the main character is Jamie, or Jim Graham. He's played by a very young Christian Bale. He's a young British upper class, very privileged young man, private school, but the family is expatriate living in Shanghai. Um, and that area of China is, at that point, a British colony. Um, and so this is set in 1941, like I said, Shanghai, China. And this is when Japan is invading mainland China. Um, and so basically, Jamie, or Jim, is a spoiled little shit. Uh,
Very much so.
and just, doesn't really have a true grasp on what life is.
No.
He's so privileged that, he can't see, you know, want in other people pretty much. But, anyways, during this time, Japan invades, uh, as he and his parents from his parents. After a few misadventures, he's he's found by Basie, played by John Malkovich. He's basically a merchant mariner, an American. I mean, almost like a pirate. Him and Frank, his sidekick, are basically just hustlers, scavengers that happen to be caught up in World War II and kind of just become men of fortune during this time. They take advantage of the chaos to line their pockets or benefit themselves as best they can. Anyways, this whole group ends up getting captured by the Japanese and sent to an internment camp. Really, I think this story follows Jim, who's a very privileged, spoiled little brat.
Yeah.
And how he kind of loses his innocence and is kind of able to reclaim it at some point.
Yeah.
And but yeah, basically he's grown up with everything he could possibly want. But I also think he has a lack of identity, or I mean, he's kind of a guy without a country, because at some point later on, I think he's talking to Basie and he's like, well, you're English.
It's like, I've never been there.
He goes, I've never been there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and he has a strong admiration for the Japanese.
Yeah.
And so I think he's kind of a kid without an identity.
And not to mention, you know, the film really hammers home that it's like the war is very apathetic to this kid's plight. It doesn't care. Like everything that happens is like, you know, he tries to surrender the Japanese. They don't care. He's a little kid in the way. Why would they care? Why would they put effort in? He's trying to be important. They don't care. Like it's he's in a world. He's an uncaring world where he's used to being cared about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And basically, him being a spoiled little shit is basically what gets him separated from mom and dad and gets him captured. But yeah, basically from Basie and his crew, you know, he kind of falls in with a hard-nosed gang and just learns how to survive at the expense of others. Whatever it takes to survive or benefit oneself, he learns how to be dog eat dog. But you know, he's also exposed to people that, specifically the doctor, the British doctor,
Nigel Havers,
is you know, trying to teach him humanity and compassion and you know, learning, and then Malkovich and his crew are kind of like, whatever you got to do to line your pockets, make it better for you. That's
make it
what
work.
You gotta do.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, I think there's kind of a, I would say it's a loss of innocence and some sort of reclamation of that innocence at some point. But learning how to, I don't know, it's definitely a struggle from going to where he starts out to where he ends up.
And I mean, you know, it's especially nowadays watching it and having the experiences that we've had, you know, for the first probably hour and a half of the movie, you're like, man, this kid sucks. Like it's just, he's not very redeemable. In fact, at one point, Spielberg being the ultimate guy to ever do this, always a hindsight devil's advocate guy, where a kamikaze pilot cannot become a kamikaze pilot because his plane sputters, and you are devastated for this guy. You're like, oh,
Yes.
he just wanted to kill himself. But
Yeah.
it like in,
It's
not
heartbreaking though.
it's not the propagandized World War II stuff that we were kind of used to. It's a
Right.
real situation of that kind of stuff. And Spielberg does that his entire career.
Yes.
And
And that's something that I love about what specifically Spielberg does with World War II.
yeah.
And I mean, you can even look at his influence on Band of Brothers and
Yeah.
things like that, where there's a humanization
Yes.
of people. It's like not every Nazi was this evil, crazed Nazi. Not every Japanese soldier was this evil, crazed. Not every U.S. soldier was.
I think his greatest
it's scared kids.
I think his great example of this is Munich, where obviously Spielberg famously Jewish,
Forgot about that one.
and portraying an event with terrorist targeting Jewish people. And there's a lot of that movie that is incredibly sympathetic towards the Palestinian cause. Like there's, I mean, he got up. People were upset at him at how humanizing he made these things, but that's what he does. He's a humanized. He humanizes things you shouldn't be humanizing. I mean, there's a specific instance in Schindler's List where Ray Fiennes, the maybe the most evil person ever put to film, he tries to be a more human person, and you're like, yeah, he can do it, even though you've seen all these terrible things he's done. I mean, it's kind of the thing that Spielberg does more than anything else. And not only that, on the other side of it too, it's not just as simple as, well, Malkovich is an American. This is World War II. Malkovich is a good guy.
He's supposed to be the good guy, right?
He's certainly not. Like he's a character that very much lives in the gray.
Oh yeah, he's definitely an anti-hero.
Absolutely.
Almost not even an anti-hero.
No,
that might be giving him too much credit.
He's almost just like at no point he's more of a con man. Like he uses Christian Bale's Jim, his character, the Christian Bale character Jim, to his own uses essentially. And so I mean,
and towards the end of the movie, I think this one line perfectly encapsulates what you're talking about. Towards the end of the movie, I think this is after the Japanese have surrendered.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of an anarchic situation.
Yeah.
But Malkovich's character, Basie, is saying, okay, come back with us and, we can, go get, and he tells them, like, didn't you learn a lot from me or something to that effect? And Jim says, I learned that anyone will do anything for a potato.
Yeah. It's
and so really, I think Malkovich's character does more to degrade Jim's innocence.
Yeah.
Than even the Japanese do.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, because like he was, he's able to float through and make things like Jim's character's much more able to relate to the to Sergeant Nagata, the sergeant of the sergeant of the internment camp. He's able to relate to him more than anybody else. So I mean, he's able to adapt and do things on his own, and like you said, all the corruption is not necessarily from that side. It's a really interesting viewpoint of it. This is based on the book by J.G. Ballard, which it really threw me whenever I realized I knew this was based on the book. What I didn't know was J.G. Ballard, the author. He's written some really bizarre stuff. Outside Empire of the Sun is pretty much the most straightforward, like kind of clean narrative he's had.
Oh, really?
He
I've never
famously
read it.
he had a book called Crash, based on it made a movie off of it, not the Oscar-winning movie from 2005, but it's about a group of car fetishists who are sexually aroused by car accidents. They filmed a movie of this, and it is a truly bizarre experience. But that's kind of what he does. He's like an alternative, like really
So
like
people will just show up to car accidents and just jay off, or
no, they get into car accidents, and it turns them on. It's weirder than however weird it is, it's weirder than that. You know, if I'm feeling
like
wild,
you can't get off it unless you get smacked in the face by a airbag or something.
it's a truly bizarre
Oh
film.
yeah, give me that GM technology.
It's a truly bizarre film, which I might make you do one of these days, because it is a weird movie. But yeah, so but like that's the kind of stuff he does. And he does this, wrote this book called High Rise, kind of about like how society falls whenever there's corruption and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of that kind of thing. And then he made this book. Now, I think one of the reasons he did this book and it was the way it was is because he did grow up in China around this time. It's not autobiographical because he never got separated, but you can tell based off of the little notes on what happens that like, okay, this guy knows what an expatriate life is like. And as do me and you, because we were now, for those, when I say expatriate, what that means is you are still a citizen of your country and you are living overseas, potentially permanently, not permanently, but you're living over there for an indeterminate amount of time. But you essentially have all the same rights and privileges of being a citizen of that country living over there. You're not taking the citizenship of the other country. So in our case, you're
under like a work visa.
Yeah. So you're a work visa, but you're living there a permit. You're not there for a couple months. You're that's there that's your home. Yeah. So we had that expat experience, and we had friends who born in Venezuela, born in China, going all over the place, we were abnormal because we moved there later in life. Going overseas, a lot of people like that, that's what they do. And that's a big connecting factor of this movie for you, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Like I think I've said in previous episodes is I think what really attracts you to a movie is whenever you can identify with it, when you can connect to it, whenever you can say, I know exactly how that feels.
Yep.
And I do think this does capture that anxiety of being an expatriate, and especially during a time of war, because we were actually expatriates during a time of war.
Yeah.
And I'll get on more of that later, but I mean, like I noted earlier, that lack of identity is interesting. Where like I think our next door neighbors were from California. I think their youngest kid had never lived in the United States.
Yeah.
I was friends with a South Korean kid, child of a South Korean diplomat, never lived in South Korea.
Yeah.
A day in his life.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah,
it's a really different experience.
It's strange.
And it's also, it's one of the things that I think it's interesting about how the film is portrayed, and it never really addresses it directly, but it's always something I thought about it whenever we were over there. It was like, okay, well, we're just white Americans. We're used to being surrounded by other white Americans. And it's an odd feeling being in that, especially being the minority in a place like that. It's an odd feeling, but you're still
the minority
by it's not
by
close.
About 99%.
Yeah, it's not close. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, you're the 1%. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to change your entire mentality of how you kind of live, because you don't have the certain, it's not necessarily rights and privileges. And yeah, it is kind of a privilege. It's like, okay, well, you know, you know how to approach your life as a white man living in the United States, but being all those privileges and all those kind of expectations are out the window when you're in that. And like you said, that anxiety is always there, just bubbling under the surface.
Yeah, especially, I mean, yeah, me and you were, expatriate kids in the Middle East. And, in Kuwait, an Arab Muslim country, whenever 9/11 occurred, and it was like
high tension. Yeah, you don't know what like. I'm not saying I would want somebody else to experience it, but it was a rare experience that I'm not sure it's something else that anybody else that I can even recreate.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think it was almost a good kick in the ass for privileged white kids.
Absolutely.
Like, oh shit, I mean, it makes you appreciate home
now. Yeah. And you know, the thing about it, like, just for the sake of transparency, we never had Jim's experience of huge Mansons, maids, servants, that wasn't us. We were, I mean,
no,
we had a lady who came in and ironed twice a week, and we thought it was weird. Like, we didn't have that. And we barely got we were excited because it was the first time we got our own rooms. Like, but it wasn't, there were no libraries, no, nothing like that.
No, it wasn't, what is it? Opulent.
Opulence is a good way. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
Jim uses that word, opulence, and
a good word, Jim. Good word. Yeah.
Opulence. It wasn't that fancy. I mean, we did go to a private American school, and we were doing just fine.
And the general idea,
we got nothing to really bitch about.
The general idea of expatriate life was there. Like, even in this situation, it's like when you went out with people and you went to parties, you were there with other expatriates. And that's just kind of the general idea. So I want to talk about Christian Bale for a little bit. So this was it wasn't his first movie, but it was his second movie. They auditioned 4,000 kids for this movie. And they were looking all over the place. He was 12 years old when he was cast. He was cast because he was in a television movie called Anastasia, The Mystery of Anna. And his co-star was Amy Irving, who was married to Steven Spielberg. And she recommended him. And he said, he's like, I watched that movie. I didn't think he was very good. I guess I'll audition him. But he auditioned him, and he was blown away by him. You know, obviously, it's so funny to watch this movie now because we have such a history with Christian Bale. Like, the first time you see him through the barbed wire and he looks emaciated, you're like, Christian Bale's first transformation of being skinny. Like, it's, you know, the kind of the half joke. And but he still has the 12-year-old Christian Bale face. And however old he is now, he's probably in his late 40s. It's pretty close already. I mean,
you can still recognize him.
You can still recognize him, definitely. And as annoying as he is, I don't think it's a Christian Bale fault. Like, I thought he was spectacular. Like, I thought he was an exceptional job.
Oh, I can't imagine another child actor doing better than that. I mean,
it's an expansive. He's in the whole movie. He's in the whole thing. Like,
and he has to play a spoiled brat. You know, someone coming out of that, being a POW.
Yeah.
Being a little hustler, you know, and finally just like being
in a shock.
I mean, he says it several times, is like, I surrender. Is like, I give up.
Yeah.
Like, what do y'all want me to be?
Yeah. And
and so
it's
um,
he did a great.
very good
I agree.
performance.
I agree, and really launched him off into the world. He following this, he kind of jumps around for a little bit. Didn't really break through in a huge way until 2000 with American Psycho, where um, plays one of the more insane characters ever put to film. It's wasn't a lot of other stuff. Famously Newsies, the adaptation of the Broadway play, Little Women, voice in Pocahontas, little stuff, independent stuff here and there. Then American Psycho really launched him up, and then you saw him in like Reign of Fire, and then Batman, and on from there.
Now, what was this movie? I was thinking about one of the first things where I saw him that I can remember in his adult career, where he plays like an ex-special forces dude, and he's trying to become an LAPD
I know
cop,
I know
basically just because he wants to kill people.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a very odd. It's a very
It is.
Dark movie, directed by David Ayer. It's called Harsh Times.
Harsh Times, yeah.
Ends up with a mercy killing of. He's like he asks his buddy to mercy kill him because he's maimed, and like he like, because I mean it's an odd
dark
movie, but I mean there's a lot of Christian Bale stuff. You don't realize how much Christian Bale stuff you've seen. Like, obviously all the Batman movies, Reign of Fire, Rescue Dawn, another World War II movie. That's a fun one. It's a little odd for a World War II movie. He's a POW named Dieter Dangler. It's a true story. He's stuck in a great name. The Prestige, 310 to Yuma.
310 to Yuma is a good one.
Played Melvin Purvis in Public Enemies. The Fighter, American Hustle.
The Fighter,
The Big Short.
There's a lot.
Played Dick Cheney in Vice. Ken Miles in Ford versus Ferrari.
I haven't seen that.
A lot of stuff. I mean, he's a guy for the longest time who's like, oh, underrated Christian Bale, and then now all of a sudden he's not underrated. And now you're like, okay, well, Christian Bale, he's always Christian Bale, and still chugging along. Okay. So whenever you think of Steven Spielberg, Empire of the Sun is not really one of those movies that really pops to the brain. There's like Spielberg is one of those filmmakers that he's so well known. It's such a strange thing whenever there's movies in his filmography that kind of get lost in the shuffle. Essentially, I kind of made a list of the lost films, the lesser works of Steven Spielberg, not necessarily lesser as in they're not as good, but the things that you never
less acclaimed.
The less acclaimed. Sugarland Express is his first feature film from 1974 with Goldie Hawn.
Never seen it.
I haven't either. I don't even know where it is. His only real bomb was 1979's 1941, which is a comedy about the people in California preparing for Pearl Harbor, preparing for an invasion after Pearl Harbor. Did not get good reviews, lost a lot of money. But that was probably the first time he's ever had like, okay, Spielberg is, because he had done Jaws and Close Encounters, but you're like, okay, is this guy, what's up? And then he went on the run that he went on. I'm going to count The Color Purple just because a lot of people don't think about it very often, and they don't associate it with him. They think of Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah with that film. It's not really a Spielberg movie is what you think of, though it was nominated for 11 Oscars. Empire of the Sun probably be in the lineup too. Always from 1989 with Richard Dreyfuss as he is a pilot, a forest fire pilot who him and John Goodman and Holly Hunter. It's a cute movie. I think our mom is a big fan of it. Now I know we don't count it as his lesser works just because it was so ubiquitous as a kid, but Hook probably would be that's not what people think of Spielberg is. Now we probably saw Hook 100 times when we were kids,
About
something like that. We watched it so many times. It was always we ran that a lot.
I ran some movies past Alex, my wife,
Yeah.
to kind of see what she thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned Hook, and she said she had never seen it.
She had never. That's so strange to me, because
Well, divorce proceedings. Yeah.
I think Hook is a great example
We're
of a
done.
movie. I think Hook is a great example of a movie that's probably not good, but we loved when we were kids. But maybe I'm wrong. I haven't watched all the way through in so long. I could be mistaken. So
I think Hook is. I mean, it's like the cheeseburger you buy at the fair.
that's a great example.
It's cheap. You know you're eating something terrible, but it tastes so good.
What you want? You're gonna feel bad. Yeah.
It does its job in the moment.
Yes, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Wonderful example. Even though it made some acclaim, again, kind of lost in the filmography. Amistad, another great film. That it just got to get lost in the show. Another tough watch. But still good one. AI, artificial intelligence. Probably
Never
one of
seen
my.
it.
It's one of my less favorite Spielberg's. But definitely these days, not really one of his well-known. Also, The Terminal, a movie I've always kind of been kind of fond of. That was in 2004, and then the other film. There are two others. One that I forgot he even directed. It's called The Adventures of Tintin. It's based on the comic book, which I've never read the comic book. I don't have any frame of reference. I've heard some people who really like the movie, but I've never seen it. And then I think one that you might have seen, the BFG, Big Friendly Giant. Oh
wait,
it's a little girl and a big friendly giant.
We did see that.
Yes. So
I took my daughter to that. Actually,
I have not seen the BFG. I've heard, and I remember you guys telling me it was good.
And it was
funny. Good. Exactly. Yeah. So those are that's the kind of the list.
It's something cute you can take your kids to. It's a funny, good natured.
It's what Spielberg has such a standard of greatness and success that whenever things don't reach that unrealistic goal, it's always seen kind of as a failure almost. Probably one of the reasons Empire of the Sun didn't get what it did, because it's kind of that
everyone just expects a complete banger.
Yes, because
everything can be a complete banger.
But the problem is he made Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and two other Indiana Jones, E.T., Jurassic Park 1 and 2, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, Munich, War of the Worlds, Lincoln, Bridge of Spies. When you have that track list, and he's coming out with a new movie this year. He wrote it as well. It's about his childhood and about his parents and their relationships and his uncle. It's called The Fablemans. It'll come out later this year. I'm sure it'll be great. But so I mean, I asked you for this podcast, do you have your list of your top 10 Spielberg films?
I do.
Okay. Well, so what I think we will do is you will start at 10 and I will start at 10, and we'll go back and forth and just and we'll just touch on these briefly. So what is your number 10 Steven Spielberg movie?
So are we going on?
So 10 to 1. Yes.
Okay. My number 10 is probably Catch Me If You Can.
So I also love Catch Me If You Can. You'll see it later in my list. It is not number 10 because I am stalling for time as I pull it up. But my number 10 is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's another one of those. There's like, oh man, the effects of this. Few directors do better with effects and
Mhm.
making it feel seamless. What's your number 9?
My number 9 would be Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
See, it's Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade was my 11, and it's not
Ah.
necessarily because I don't like it. It's just because of the amount of stuff that Spielberg has. I got Minority Report number 9. It's it's as sci-fi, as modern sci-fi. I really like the world he creates and how it, even though it's futuristic, it's really cool with
Yeah.
everything. And we talked a little bit about it in the Colin Farrell episode. What is your number 8?
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
The film that is responsible for the PG-13 rating. Because eating monkey brains and how violent it was, they're like, well, we this can't be PG.
I like when he rips his heart out.
Rips his heart. Yeah, exactly. That was and especially our
When
age,
I was a kid, I was just like,
man,
yeah.
I agree. As a kid, you're like, man, this movie is wild. Great movie. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. My number 8 is Catch Me If You Can. So,
Oh, okay.
and I'm going to go on a limb, say outside of The Departed, it's probably Leonardo DiCaprio's other best performance. It's as charming as he's ever been in a movie. I love DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can. What is your number 7?
Yeah. I went with E.T.
E.T., the classic, a film I saw for the first time about 4 months ago.
Oh, wow.
I'm ashamed of myself, but I finally got it down there. My number 7 is Munich. There's a lot to it, and it's another one of Spielberg's classic. Like, man, this is not exactly a fun watch. But the thing he does really good is he is able to turn real dark material and still make it somehow enjoyable and entertaining. Like
I think because he's able to humanize it.
That's probably the factor in it. Like the tension inherent. They're trying to murder a guy, and you're like, oh, is the bomb going to go off? Like, all that kind of crazy stuff. What is your number 6?
Schindler's List.
Schindler's List. You will see that later in my list. My number 6, Schindler's List, exactly humanizing again, heart-wrenching, long, flies by, as entertaining as a Holocaust film can be, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
My number 6 is Jurassic Park. The original blockbuster for me. That whenever that's the movie I think of whenever it got me into going to movies as theaters. Yes.
Like,
dinosaurs are right there. Yes.
Whenever you first went to go see a movie and it was
that's
the one
out of your mind. That's the one I think of. What is your number 5?
Jurassic Park.
Very, very good choice.
Yeah. Now, for the same reason, that.
And our dad did
our
dad did a great job of it too. He's like, okay, guys, we're gonna be sitting down. Speakers are gonna be loud. It's like dinosaurs are right behind you, and there's gonna be dinosaurs on the screen. You're like, well, here we go. The funny thing is, a couple of years ago, I decided to show my kids, and I was like, oh, dinosaur movie. The dinosaurs were in the movie for about 15 minutes. There's not a whole lot of dinosaurs.
Oh, that
in the movie.
last one?
No, the first one. The first Jurassic Park, there are not a whole lot of dinosaurs in it. Like, it's not very and it all looks very authentic. That's the other thing. My number 5 is Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original, the one with the Ark of the Covenant. All the cool set pieces and all that went along with that. What is your number 4?
Hook.
It's pure nostalgia. Like you said, you got to have that cheeseburger when you go to the fair. That's just
that's the fair cheeseburger.
My number 4 is E.T. Despite, whenever even though I first watched it for only a couple months ago, like my wife's sitting next to me going like, no, you're not going to like it. It's the effects are going to be bad. And it all works. It all still works. Everything about it's good. Wonderful. What is your number 3? Amistad. Great choice. On my list, a little lower down on my list, but still a solid choice. My number 3 is Jaws. The original, terrified of the terrified of the water movie. We never, we lived in landlocked Texas for the majority of our lives. Sharks were not really a consideration until actually we moved overseas. And even then it was never, I don't know. I just never had the fear of sharks that the rest of the world had. All right.
Well, I was almost a mile offshore in a small kayak when we were overseas, and I saw infamous shark fin. And I was,
I have no doubt.
I heard Donna.
Also, Robert Shaw, probably one of my favorite performances in a Spielberg movie as Flint, the crazy survivor of the USS Indianapolis in Jaws. Great performance. What is your number 2?
Saving Private Ryan.
My number 2 is also Saving Private Ryan.
Nice.
It's I remember R-rated movies, especially whenever this came out, we were we were teenagers, or we were starting to become teenagers. And I remember there was a big conversation between members of our family being like, we should probably take the kids to this anyway, despite this being an R-rated movie, just because of how important it was, because it was that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I mean, those first 20 minutes. Yes.
Just seeing what dudes actually did.
I mean, it's an incredible film, and one as graphic as it is, I've seen it dozens of times, dozens upon dozens. So I mean,
that's the crazy thing is like Schindler's List. You're like once every about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. It's not one you pop on every weekend. Yeah.
But Private Ryan, you can kind of
because out of those 20,
even though it's graphic,
those first 20 minutes are incredibly graphic, but after those 20, you're really still invested in the story. There's a lot more to it. So, all right. So what is your number 1?
Jaws.
Very well thought. I mean,
and specifically what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because of that scene.
The USS Indianapolis scene. Yeah.
I think that's one of the finest scenes ever of any movie I've ever seen.
Just the three guys down there being drunk, talking about stuff.
One of my favorite. They're all drunk on the boat. And, correct me if I'm wrong. You probably know more about this, but I don't know his name.
Robert Shaw.
He was actually like fucked up drunk whenever he did that.
Yes. A notorious drunk in real life. Yes.
And that was mostly improv, as I understand it.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but he was a naval veteran from World War II, was he?
Yes, he was in World War II.
Was he actually on the...
No, he was not on the Indianapolis.
I don't think... Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I was stating this exact scene yesterday. It's like, you ever seen a shark's eyes like a doll's eye? Like it's so
Dead eyes.
It's so back. Great. Yes. Yeah.
That's one of the best movie scenes I think ever.
One of the all-time Oscar snubs in my mind. No Oscar nomination for Robert Shaw, and it is a shame. And not only that, it's not only him reciting it, it's Roy Schneider and Richard Dreyfuss sitting back and going, man, that is a wild story. Like,
you can actually see him like,
man, yeah. I mean,
it's so convincing.
Yes.
Of a story, and I mean, he's got that like silver tooth.
And keeps calling Chief. Oh, I love it. It's so great.
Chief.
It's so great. I agree.
That's one of the best movie scenes ever.
Ever. And for all the reasons we talked about before, even though it's not exactly the best watch. Schindler's List is my number one, just based off of greatness. It's almost flawless.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I could talk about that Robert Shaw scene for 40 more minutes. I mean, he's
I know it.
So good, so good. All right.
Oh, it's so brilliant. I love it. Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to move on to this week's polls for dumbass. To switch things up, I thought of doing this in a couple different ways. We have a lot of Spielberg movies. We got. I was thinking, oh, well, a lot of people seen a lot of Spielberg. Could do Christian Bale. John Malkovich is really out there. I decided to switch things up. I'm going to do the top 10 box office films from 1987, the same year that Empire of the Sun came out. We're going to go backwards from 10 to 1 and see what you have seen. So the 10th highest grossing film from 1987, The Witches of Eastwick.
Nope.
Sound familiar? It is Cher, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Susan Sarandon as apparently witches, and Jack Nicholson as the devil.
No, thanks.
So that was number 10. Number 9, you've seen The First Lethal Weapon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the classic, Hell yeah. all that back and forth, incredible mullet hair from Mel Gibson. Everything
just glorious,
glowing. I mean, incredible stuff. Now
I love it.
I'm almost positive you've seen the sequel to this movie, but I don't know if you've seen the original. The number 8 film from 1987, Stakeout, with Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez. Have you seen the original, not the sequel with Rosie O'Donnell?
I've seen both.
You've seen both. Okay. I remember.
But much younger.
I don't know why.
I have enough sense to not watch it now. But as a child.
All right. How about number 7? Michael J. Fox, The Secret of My Success. He works
Never heard of it.
He works for his uncle in a office and works in the mailroom, and then fakes like he is he's also an executive, and it's 80s hijinks. It's fun to watch. How about number 6, the original cop versus the mob movie, The Untouchables.
Great movie. Great movie.
There's a lot about it I like and a lot about it I hate, but I'm more like than I hate. I mean,
that's a fascinating story.
Handsome, charismatic Kevin Costner, Robert De Niro dialed up to 90, Sean Connery doing Sean Connery stuff. Great across the board. How about number 5? If you haven't seen The Witches of Eastwick, I very much doubt you've seen Moonstruck.
Nope.
Okay. Cher's Oscar win. Great film.
You lose me at Cher, man.
Maybe the most Italian movie to ever gabagool. It's incredibly
gabagool.
It's the most Italian movie I've seen in a long time. All right, coming up on number 4, a movie I have watched with you dozens of times. Good Morning Vietnam.
I love it. I love that movie. I really do. I think it's one of what's his name?
Robin Williams.
Yeah, I think it's one of his absolute best performances. I mean, he's able to combine his outrageous comedic side.
That's a good way to put it.
Side. Yeah,
I was thinking the same thing. It's the best film that suits his real life persona. I agree.
Yep. R.I.P.
Yes. Number 3. I know you've seen the original. I don't know if you've seen number 2, Beverly Hills Cop 2. That's I
don't know about 2.
I'm not sure if I remember the exact premise of the film. I remember Bridget Nielsen being in it. That's all I really remember about it.
I don't remember much about it.
Made a ton of money. So, how about number 2, the film that saved 1,000 marriages, The Namesake of Your Wife, Fatal Attraction.
Yeah, I have seen it, but it's been a very long time.
And you know what? I
but
rewatched it the other day and I was like, man, there's a lot of this I don't remember. But Fatal Attraction, number 2 hit of the year. The number 1 hit of the year, runaway box office success, starring 3 staples of the 80s, directed by Leonard Nimoy.
Oh Lord.
3 Men and a Baby.
Oh God.
So
I watched it as a kid.
I think the same thing. It's like, you know what I remember? There are 3 men. There's a baby. That's all I remember. Like,
yeah, and they're like, oh no, it pooped.
and
It
now
we
I
have to change a diaper.
I guarantee
that's all I remember.
I guarantee in hindsight, as fathers of girls, we'd probably be like, this movie sucks. This is stupid. It's literally like, it's not that different. They you know, the 80s shenanigans and hijinks and stuff. Oh man, I guarantee it. Do you remember who the 3 men are?
Tom Selleck.
Yes.
Something.
Yeah.
Dunneberg.
Steve Guttenberg. Very good.
Guttenberg.
Yes.
Ooh.
One of the most successful television actors in the history of television. Successful shows in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s.
I know I'm gonna kick myself.
Ted Danson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Looking back on it,
How can you not win?
Okay. You know, it's funny how, like, looking back on it, you're like, oh, Fatal Attraction was really a zeitgeist type of movie. Beverly Hills Cop 2, Good Morning Vietnam. All these movies, you're like, okay, I understand why these made money. Looking back on it, you're like, 3 Men and a Baby made a ton of money. That was the number 1 film of the year. It's like, it's baffling.
If it works, it works.
If it works,
man.
it works.
If it entertains people and they like to go see it, then I mean,
I want to know if anybody
going to make money.
And I don't
you
even
can't argue with numbers.
And I don't even see it on TV anymore. It's not one of those television staples, but whatever. All right, Jake, I think that's it for me. You know what that means?
I got bad news, bud.
What's that?
You're in the hot box.
I'm ready. I'm shut in.
All right. So this week, I think, like I've said before, I'm a history buff, World War II guy. So it's going to be World War II heavy.
Oh, good, good. I'm a big fan.
So
not of the war itself, but the history of it.
Right. No, we don't. Like, that was the best.
Yeah, yeah.
So who was the emperor of Japan during World War II?
Okay, so luckily, before watching this, I watched The Last Emperor from 1987, the film that won Best Picture, and it was all about the last emperor of China. And they went into specifically the relationship between China and Japan and the Emperor Hirohito.
Correct.
The fun thing about that is what I learned from that is Emperor Hirohito went on to the radio and surrendered and made his address. It is the first time his voice had ever been heard on the radio.
Yeah.
So it's a wild story. Like the leader of one of the 3 Axis powers, nobody had ever heard his voice before. It's wild.
Yeah. No, it's it's actually really fascinating following the so he was actually emperor from 1926 until 1989.
Jeez. Hirohito, so obviously Hitler, who you believe killed himself in 1944. Mussolini was hung up and beaten to death by a crowd, and he was dead by 45. And Hirohito lived to the 80s. He lived into our lifetimes.
Yeah, he was still an emperor.
Yeah,
wild. Yeah, it was a very controversial decision.
Yeah.
From the general at the time. I have
Interesting.
questions about that.
Good
But
to know.
yeah, it was controversial, and yeah, I can certainly look back on it. And it's like if they just said, Hitler can stay the boss.
that's really wild. Yeah.
All right. So on the flip side of the coin, who was the leader of the U.S. Army Air Forces or U.S. Army forces in the Far East, and then head of the occupation and basically governing
Okay. So
governorship
okay.
of Japan post-war occupation.
Okay. So
Japan.
this is also my of the World War II history that I know. It's always the European theater. Like if you said, "Oh, who's the head of the?" I was like, "Oh, it was George Marshall." And I was like, "Nope, that's the European theater." Is it MacArthur?
Yep.
Ah, nice.
Very well done.
Yes.
General Douglas MacArthur.
Douglas
Yeah,
MacArthur.
he was
Okay,
commander of U.S. forces in the Far East.
Yes.
And then, was basically top dog in Japan post-war.
Interesting.
And he was actually the one that recommended not trying Hirohito for
Really?
war crimes.
And
Because and his argument was that the Japanese people viewed him as a god.
Yes. So
They
yeah,
literally thought he was
that makes sense.
a divine. And so he was like, well, basically Hirohito was a bitch. And so he was like, I can make this dude my bitch. And if I tell him,
that makes
hey,
sense.
y'all fall in line. So he was basically worth more to
that
them.
Makes more sense. So
in that sense.
Now
I'm not saying it's not a travesty that he wasn't.
Now that being said, if you want to go down a awful Wikipedia rabbit hole, look up Japanese atrocities during World War II, especially in China. There is an extensive list.
There is an awesome book called Rampage. It's by James M. Scott, and it specifically deals with the Philippines campaign. Covers Bataan Death March, civilians being captured, and yes, it does a great job of outlining Japanese atrocities in the South Pacific. I mean, stuff like taking babies and infant babies and throwing them up in the air and sticking them on bayonets and
terrible stuff.
Rape.
Sure.
Horrific shit. But that's a very good book.
Very well researched.
You are interested in that.
Okay. Rampage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, God, I was still on. Okay. All right. So in this movie, aviation is a big focus. World War II aviation.
Yes.
Obviously. As you know, I mean, I've always been a fan of aviation and everything. I mean, I was a guy with World War II planes on my wall. And okay, so the infamous Zero, probably the most ubiquitous aircraft of Japan during World War II. Who was the manufacturer of the Zero?
I want to say it's Mitsubishi.
Yep.
Yes, man, I'm nailing it today.
You are.
It's like it's one of those things where somebody made the joke about, I know I'm getting older because of this, this, and this, and one of the things is, I really got into World War II. Like, right. For some, because there's so much information out there, and throughout the years, and the History Channel used to make its hay off of World War II stuff. All it was
I grew up on that.
History Channel,
World War II documentaries.
All it was World War II documentaries, stuff about MacArthur, and not to mention,
now it's like digging for gold and shit.
When we were kids, it was on all the time. We had a grandfather who was really into it. My father-in-law is really into it. It's never been something that's I've been apart from, and there's always so much information on it. And I
Yeah.
guess somewhere along the lines, I just remembered that. But yeah, hey, doing so
Well,
good.
Hey, good job.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, on that note, I will add in that I read something about Spielberg on this movie. He actually had a grandfather, if I read correctly, that was a B-25 Mitchell pilot.
Oh, really?
During World War II. Yeah, and one of his favorite childhood films was Bridge on the River Kwai, and that
Another
was
great
actually,
movie.
That was a movie that I watched several times with our pappy,
Yes.
our mom's dad,
Yeah.
and I actually own that VHS copy.
Oh,
And,
really?
yeah,
It's
I've got it.
two
And
of
so
them.
that was
Is it two? Is it a double VHS?
yeah, I think
I was
it
gonna
is,
say it's a pretty long
in a little
movie.
box,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it's yeah.
That makes
But
sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
thought,
mean, Bridge on the and the quick note about that is the film. Whenever Spielberg got the rights, he wanted David Lean, the
yes,
director, to direct this.
of yeah,
Yes, and he was there. He was around. Like, and David
yep.
Lean, incredible film director of a lot of different stuff. Specifically, Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge on the River Kwai being the biggest one. Yeah.
Madness. All right. So, Ben,
Jake, I'm ready.
I think we have more experience with being evacuated from a war zone than most of
Yes,
our watchers.
I would
Probably.
say I would say so. Probably.
All right. So while I still lived overseas, we went through an evacuation drill.
Yes.
With the U.S. military,
Mhm.
both to train them and to train us. So we took a craft from shore out to an amphibious assault ship,
Yes.
and then had a full day's tour out there.
I remember this. Yes.
All right. So what was that craft called that took us from shore to ship?
I believe technically it was a hovercraft.
It was a hovercraft, but technically, what was the name? The military designation for it.
Military designation for a hovercraft.
There's a million Marines just screaming right now. Oh, actually, I don't think anyone's watching.
Well,
but
I know a subscriber who was also evacuated, who is in the military, who knows exactly what we're talking about right now.
Is he a C-130 pilot?
He might be.
Okay.
Okay. So
right.
I actually don't know what it is.
It's an LCAC.
LCAC. Okay. What is that?
LCAC.
What does that stand
Landing
for?
Craft Air Cushion.
Landing craft air cushion. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a big ass hovercraft.
I remember it. I remember it
And
being. It
went right up in the ass end of this big ass ship.
Beach, and I remember it specifically being very, very loud. I remember it being incredibly loud. We weren't in it very long.
Not really.
No, but I mean,
I was claustrophobic.
It was bizarre, but it was an interesting experience.
Yeah. All right. And so, last question. So while I have been through evacuation drills, and we went through 9/11 overseas and things like that, I was never evacuated out of a active war zone.
Correct.
However, you, our younger brother, and our mom were.
Yes.
And I believe I picked y'all up at the airport.
Correct. Here. Yes.
So just tell me a little bit about getting evacuated out of a war zone.
So the interesting thing is, obviously in the film it's depicted as a chaotic, like, got to get to the, like, all this kind of get out of there. It was not as time consuming and hectic as far as danger was involved. It's more of a proximity to danger as in immediate danger. Kuwait was a very small country and it was close to Iraq, obviously. So it was something, it was just like, well, we don't want somebody that close. So as opposed to being like, hey, you have 3 hours, we're like, we're going to leave in a week. Like, okay.
Right.
So in a week, we're going to leave. I'm like, okay. So we'll start packing
and
now.
you just went to the airport
and we just went to the airport. Like there was no, now the airport was busy, but it's not like we didn't have tickets and we're trying to get at the gate. We had reservations.
You
and
weren't running through a crowd.
No.
Airplane.
Yeah, no. It was nothing like that. It was I viewed it as,
thank God I get to go home.
Exactly. I get to go back home. Like
Thank you, Saddam.
I remember the day, one of the happiest moments of my life was the day I found out that was going to happen. It was the day the space shuttle Columbia exploded coming back into the atmosphere, because it exploded. Yeah. And I remember being on TV going, it's like, wow, that's crazy. That's terrible. And then they came in, I think for that lunch that day, it's like, oh, we're going to go in a week. And I'm just like, okay. Like, so, it was, and then,
well, and Saddam started lobbing Scud missiles into Kuwait. One went into the Sultan Center. You remember that? That was like the mall, and
that it was like it was a supermarket. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So he started throwing Scuds around, and y'all had to bug out.
So that it was one of those things. Like I didn't know anybody who actually was in any danger afterwards, and we actually were going to move back, but things kind of moved. But I mean, not luckily not as hectic. So
yeah, pretty calm.
Yeah.
All right, Ben.
Jake,
you're free to go.
Jake, I have a question for you, just based off of the film and what it reminded me of whenever I saw it. Do you remember one of your? I don't really consider you much of a video game guy, but when I think of video games and I think of you, I think of this game. Do you remember the name of the game you played, which was a World War II flight simulator, where you would make strafing runs, you would do dogfights, you would knock out bridges?
Yep.
I have been looking.
I don't think I could come up with a game, but it was badass.
It was great.
I mean, you were like, it was like World War II Aces or something like
that. World War II Aces might be World War II Aces might be the exact thing.
But we had a joystick, and
we had a joystick. Control Alt E would be eject. I mean, it was great. And you'd like you said, bombing runs. You'd be in little all these kind of cool things. It was that was whenever you were a kid and you're like, man, video games are the future. This is too cool. And
that's kind of the only computer game I've ever gotten into.
And this was
because I was into World War II.
And this was the 90s stuff. This was the mid to late 90s. This was not like cutting edge. This is DOS computer games.
CD-ROM.
Yeah, absolutely. One day I'll find out what that is. One day I'll find out what that is and go from there. But all right. So Jake, what is your final film? So Empire of the Sun, a movie you do enjoy, and a movie I like too, didn't make my top 10 or your top 10 of Spielberg movies. What is your film rating?
Well, no, it made my top 10 Spielberg. It didn't make my top 10 overall.
Yeah. Okay. So.
No, I really love it. I like war movies, historical movies. I'm specifically interested in World War II, things like that. I thought it was beautiful cinematography, historically accurate, and I think it was super well done.
I agree.
This is yeah, I really, really, really enjoy this. But yeah, it's not gonna make my top 10.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's good.
I enjoyed it as well. I have it 3.5 out of 5. The annoyance of Jim only takes me so far. Like he's really annoying, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean,
Don't you love when the Chinese maid is like looting the house and just slaps the fuck out of him?
Yes, it is so great. Like it's one of those things you're like, this kid sucks. And then you're just like, what's this lady gonna help him with it? And you, oh wow, he smacked her. Like
is it bad that like
the same
one of the highlights of the 2 past films is a little girl getting kicked and this kid getting slapped?
It admittedly, I don't think this one was played for comedy. The last one was. So I mean, we'll see.
I promise I don't beat my kids much.
Empire of the Sun, it's not even in the top 10 of 1987 for me, but 1987 has a lot of great movies. Full Metal Jacket also in 1987. The original RoboCop, the original Predator, Spaceballs, Harry and the Hendersons.
Damn. Oh, that was tough competition.
Brave Little Toaster.
I vaguely remember that.
Jaws: The Revenge. I think it's the 4th Jaws movie.
I only like the first Jaws, or the real Jaws. That's the only one.
Yeah.
That's the only one I like.
Good Morning Vietnam, as we said. Princess Bride. My favorite movie from that year, Broadcast News. Exceptional film from James L. Brooks, but a lot of different stuff in 1987. An underrated movie year. All right, I think that just about does it for us. Thank you so much for joining us. You can follow me on Twitter at NebIsBen, on Letterboxd at Neb810, Instagram at Ben Miller Movies. Check out my website at icecreamforfreaks.com. You can follow my other writing on the Film Experience and Cinema Scholars. I am about to do a review of a 3-hour Bollywood film on Netflix. So please check out that if you get the chance. I mean, cutting edge stuff. So that's the other thing of living overseas. India was the closest like media conglomerate we had. So we got a lot of Indian entertainment. So we have a lot of Bollywood. Yeah, it's all that kind of thing we get from. You can find me on other pods. I'm the David Thewlis of podcasting. Jake, where can the people find you?
Shanghai, 1941.
Nice. You know where he will be in a red overcoat and breeches. Is that what they're called? The little shorts and shorts and tall shorts. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Critic Common Pod. Please like, subscribe, rate, and review. Really enjoy everybody's feedback. Please keep it coming. Enjoy the show wherever you get your podcasts. We will try to catch you next time. And thank you so much for joining us.
What's the trick? What's the trick? In making my love stick. What's the trick?